our successes, our future, what we're negotiating as strengths for our community. I'm pleased to have today friends and colleagues. Farhia Jordan is here. She's the, I think, vice chair or the chair of the St. Paul NAACP. Farhia, correct me with the right title.
President of St. Paul.
President, St. Paul NAACP. Guy Bowling is here. Guy Bowling has an agency, an organization that is serving youth in the community, is an educator. And my friend and colleague, Al Flowers, is here. Al Flowers with On the Ground Strategies. I call him the field marshal of the movement. So thank you all for being here. The occasion is to honor and to promote you, Farhia, and also Guy, because you both are announced recipients of Bush Fellowships. That's huge. Congratulations. I'm going to ask you both. Thank you, first of all, and give you praise and applause, but ask you both to talk about what the Bush Fellowship is and what it means, what kind of work you're going to be doing or allowed to pursue because of the fellowship. Let me start with Farhia.
Thank you again, Brother Al McFarlane and Inside News, for your leadership and tireless and advocacy for our voices to be heard around the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Inside News, you and your team. We really appreciate for your hard work. And I also want to honor Brother Al Flower, who's on the call, for his support and leadership, and Guy, who's here, and a fellow with Bush Fellowship. Thank you all. I just want to say, even though I am the president of St. Paul NAACP, a lot of the time we do the hard work we do in the community, we don't get paid for it. It's a volunteer work, it's an activism, and a lot of people who advocate for a lot of issues in our community know what I'm talking about. We are the least people who get paid, even though we buy our own coffee and our lunch and our gas every day, but we're never going to sleep knowing that the community is not served. That advocacy is here. It will always be here, and unity, working together with my brothers and sisters and African American and African immigrant communities, is tirelessly we're going to keep doing. And all the activists, advocates out there, thank you. And I am with you for day one. Thank you very much. I also do, I work for Voice of East African Women, and I'm the founder and executive director. I've been working with that organization for the last few years. And my day job, other than NAACP and activism, how I pay my bills and how I put bread on the table with my children, is making sure doing the work I do, but different hat. And this time I'm working with a view. I'm passionate about advocacy, violence against women. As myself, I am a survivor of female genital mutilation. It happened to me when I was a little girl. That little girl inside of me is pushing me to do more. To be heard, the voices of those women and of those children, especially young girls, to let them know that they have a voice. Whatever I can do to advocate to bring that injustice. I tirelessly advocate for the community when it comes to issues like hate crimes and disparity and Islamophobia and violence against women and sexual assault. Just basically, as a woman, an African woman, Black woman, I'm making sure my fight with View is to do what I already love to do in fighting for the community. And I'm just so honored and humble and grateful that Bush Fellowship sees that in us. Sometimes you forget about yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You look out there, you're doing it, and you're wearing different hats, and your activism, you're fighting for people, making sure the homelessness is been and have a voice. And then somebody say, slow down. We see you, what you're doing in your community. Thank you. This is about you. Take good care of yourself. Take a break. This money is $100,000 that we're going to give it to you. Mm-hmm. It's a 24 recipients, which I all congratulate them, including my brother here, Guy. I would say this is something you don't go to bed at night and wake up in the morning and say somebody's really thinking of you. And you don't know how to accept that because you're always doing and giving other people, not thinking about money. And I'm just thinking about how can I buy my coffee and stop by and meet with Al Flowers and other activists to make sure our voices are heard. I just want to say, I don't want to say too much, but I'm honored and grateful for Bush Bush Foundation stepping up and giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, congratulations again. That's fantastic. Guy, jump in here. Congratulations to you, brother, as well. Talk about your organization and your vision, your work, and what you will do. How will this grant or fellowship support your work?
Absolutely. Thanks again, Mr. McFarlane, for having me on your show. I had the pleasure to meet with you.
Please call me Al.
Al.
Before, yeah.
That's right. I had well, I've known of your work for quite some time, over decades. I had an honor to meet with you last summer when I was sharing information about the annual event we do in North Commons Park, pulling together families and children and community folks to have a celebration and recognizing men and their ability to be involved in the life of their kids, or what they're trying to do to ensure they're involved in their life. So I appreciate being on the show. Thanks again to Brother Al Flowers. I appreciate you. And my sister and my fellow, Farhi, congratulations to you as well, in being a Bush recipient, because, you know, we were under wraps for a long time. We didn't even learn who the other fellows were until yesterday. And so when I saw you, I said, oh, my sister who's doing fabulous work at the NAACP.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to meet you through Brother Al as well. Back last summer, we were meeting over at McAfee's place, having a cookout in the outside, and so we were talking about what we were trying to do. But I can appreciate the Bush Foundation as well and the Bush Fellowship. I've been doing work in the community with fathers, specifically low-income, non-custodial fathers, men of color, who's never been married, but the hope is to put them in the position to take care of their children and know that there's a lot of things that needs to take place in order for them to be stable, to even understand what that responsibility is, and then what their role is as a result of that. And so I've been working with fathers through the Father Project, an organization that started from scratch 21 years ago, back in 1998, serving dads in the community, multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic. We started specifically with African-American fathers because we were in North Minneapolis, and that's who was in the neighborhoods. But what we realized is that there was many different cultures that needed the services we provided to put men in position to be stable financially, emotionally, physically, and provided them those resources to be there for their children. So we've been doing that for a long time and have expanded to many sites throughout the state, rural sites. And so we've been doing that work. For me personally, I think as far as he was saying, I grew up in North Minneapolis. I grew up right there across the street from North Commons Park, where we hold that event every year. And I also spent a majority of my youth in Chicago. I was born in the south side of Chicago, impoverished neighborhood where there was challenges here, there, everywhere. And my single mother decided that she couldn't necessarily protect us within that environment just based on her own financial resources. So there's not too much she could do other than try to keep us home. But as we boys start growing up, she couldn't keep us in the house. So she realized that she needed to relocate, and she heard of this great place at that time, she felt, for raising kids was Minnesota. So we came up here in junior high school, and I grew up without my father, unfortunately. So I give all credit to my single mother and all the things she did to keep the family together. But it put something in me that said, you know, when I get older, if I ever become a parent, I'm going to do the complete opposite of what my father wasn't able to do for me. And so I've had that passion in me for quite a while. But unfortunately, as a result of fathers not being in your life, you tend to make choices and decisions that impact you in a way you didn't even realize. And so I became, I would say unfortunate at the time, but it's fortunate today because it put me in position to fulfill a purpose of calling. I became a father at 15. And then I became a teen single father at 16. At 17, I moved out and took care of my son and raised him up until, you know, he went off to college. I had help from his mother as well. We co-parented, but that's that. And he's now married, college educated. He got 2 kids of his own. So those of us who are on the phone that got grandkids, we know that's the second coming of being a dad, and almost in a way you can start over. So I enjoy my grandchildren, but it put a spark in me to all the things that I had to overcome with a whole lot of guidance and direction to be the responsible father that I had made a commitment to myself to be as a kid. But just because you make that commitment don't mean you're going to do it without education and experience and support and guidance and direction and expectation. And so the things that I've learned is what helped me develop a passion to do the work that I do. And then unfortunately, when I was 27, I didn't know my father at all. I met him once when I was a teenager, and I was excited as a teenager. And met him and hung out with him and then never heard from him again after that, which was devastating. Like, okay, didn't know you, and then I met you, and then you abandoned me, and like I felt, really impacted by that emotionally. And and I didn't realize it until I got older, having to make decisions as an adult, as a dad. I remember he reached back out to me when I was probably late 20s. I was already raising my son. He was already in elementary school, junior high school. I remember he reached out to me, and I wouldn't take his calls, right? I was angry, right? A lot of times we're angry at our fathers, and we walk around with that, and it impacts so many aspects of our lives, and we don't even realize it at the time, right? So I didn't want to talk to him. He would call and leave messages and leave messages and leave messages, and I wouldn't pick up the phone. I wouldn't call him back, but I couldn't wait to hear those messages, right? So there was something inside me that I needed to have to be filled in order to be whole. And then when I finally decided to call him back, it was too late. He ended up getting murdered. And so the way I felt at that time is I regretted the fact that I didn't get a chance to talk to him. I understand why I didn't talk to him, but if I had an opportunity to talk to him, I would have. And so that inspired me to continue the work that I'm doing, not only on myself, but with these men, because I wouldn't want another child to have that experience where they needed their father, had an opportunity to connect with their father, but because of their anger towards him, they didn't. And then he's no longer there. Because if you can mend it, I agree that you should. And so the work that I'm doing is help men be whole, help fathers be stable economically, emotionally, physically, but also what the Bush is going to allow me to do is go on and continue and advance my education. I'm going to the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and I'm getting my MPA because I want to learn more about how to be better as a leader, have broader impact. In addition to, I want to build and forge relationships and connect with the organizations, improve community and police relations, in addition to establish a network to get the word out, because I can't be everywhere about why it's important to invest in fathers, because I believe in our communities, they're one of the most important and vital untapped resources that we have. I can't hear you.
You said your dad was murdered?
Yeah.
What happened? Tell me about that.
Well, my father, when he was dating my mother, and I don't know if it was the times or what exactly, but he had multiple families that my mother didn't know about. He was 15 years her senior, so they didn't hang in the same circle. So she didn't know, and he met her when she was a teenager, and then they began to have a romantic relationship by the time she got 20. And so he had multiple children outside of that. And so my mother eventually said, oh, this is not working. She had 2 boys by me and my older brother. And then I had a younger sister who didn't have the same father. And then she lost her mother. And so she just wanted to relocate, just get out of Chicago because my dad had hurt her. And so she came here. And then my dad continued on with a particular cavalier lifestyle. He had families over here and families over there. And my dad ultimately got murdered because it was a lover's quarrel. He was dating some young woman. He divorced his original wife, but he was dating some woman, and he got into it with the woman's ex-boyfriend. They laid in wait for him, and they ambushed him. And they killed him. This was back in 1995. And so that's what happened with him. But it was, for me, it was closure in a sense. But at the same time, I discovered family members I didn't even have a clue about, relatives I didn't have a clue about. And so it's been a process of healing from all of that, because now I'm really close with them as a result of all of this. And so it brought us together, but at the same time, it put that passion in me that I want to prevent that from happening to children like me. And now I'm an adult, so I want to put men in position to be stable, understand what it means to be married, or understand what it means to be in a healthy relationship, and understands what it means to have a stable foundation to take care of their kids and establish that so they have a chance to grow up to be healthy, happy, and successful.
So this is about trauma, and Farhia, you started off talking about the trauma of women and the trauma of African women, the question of genital mutilation. How does that impact women? And how does it impact families? And where are we now as a community and as a culture with the immigrant women here in Minnesota and in the West, but also at home? How is our culture dealing with the knowledge of science and of medicine and of health that lets us look at those cultural practices differently? Where are we? And put that in the context of talking about trauma. Because Brother Guy talked about the trauma of his growing up, and you talked about trauma as well.
That's right. I believe trauma is what we are advocating every day. These police brutalities, all of this justice for George Floyd and Philando Castile and many before him, and I'm sure many after him. this is something that we in the heart in our communities that we talk about every day. And we are the least who are being funded when we talk about these issues. And it is a sad part is, you know what, people like us who understands the need is there, something inside of us making sure that we don't give up, even though we don't get funded, even we don't have support for our leaders who are supposed to be funding people like us, we are being overlooked at because of the color of that skin. So yeah, and part of my brother was saying, and I agree with him, we have to keep continuing, even though I have sometimes I put some pictures, different pictures on my table.
Mhm.
So this is my father right here.
Ah.
My father was a good man and a strong man, and we were all afraid of him. As a little girl, I didn't even know how to talk to my father. I wish, and he died many years ago through gun violence. And in Somalia, you guys know, there's a lot of killings that take place. So one of his bodyguards who was helping him accidentally pulled out the AK-47 and shot my father 4 times. And that was accidental. That was one of his mans. Sometimes your own mans are protecting you by maybe not doing the right thing, and that could happen what happened to my father. So my father died a few years ago. Female genital mutilation is nothing new to the Somali community. 98% of women has to go through that. They always say I always thought growing up back in Somalia, this is part of father figure, religion, culture, every household has to go through. But now coming to the United States and learning a lot, educating myself, that's not true. It's a cultural practice, it's not religion practice. And that cultural practice is to the satisfaction of the man having, if you're not circumcised, if you're not mutilated, then you're not going to get married, you're not going to have a good husband. So every mother, to her heart, protects that and making sure this little girl, as the age as young of 5, 6, 7 years old, she has to go through this mutilation. And there's no medication, and everything is happening right there. And I survived, and many of the girls will survive, but some of them doesn't get that luck. They end up dying in the middle of those ritual. We have the Liberian community go through that. We have the Kenyan community go through that. The Nigerian community go through that. And other Asian communities also, like the India or other Asian communities go. It's like more than 40 countries around the world, including people are practicing here in the United States. Hush, hush, underground, people have been taken and do that. Doctors don't leave any footprints behind that they do in this ritual. Like those 2 little girls that were taken away from Minnesota back in 2017 was taken to Michigan, Detroit. This Indian lady did those rituals to 2 little Sudanese girls from here. So that is something that is unacceptable. So my hope and my fight, and it will always continue, is to make sure this little girl inside of me is not going away. She's going to continue fighting. More than 200 million around the world is affected about this female genital mutilation. It's a mental health. It's a long-term health as a woman. Confidence is not going to be there. You look at a man, it's basically sexual abuse for little girls. Okay, we don't identify that. We don't put that stamp and say this is a sexual. And my hope and Bush Foundation and invest in someone like me, it will elevate and help me to better my leadership and to advocate more and to do and degree. And sometimes you're doing so much, but having a little name under your title, it says, oh, she has this master's degree or whatever, maybe will open bigger doors. Like my vision will go to the United Nations, you know, the United Nations and the World Health Organization. And then we can go back to Africa and educate those communities and African women in the refugee camps. It just helps me to know that this opportunity will give me more. I've been talking to University of Minnesota, and I'm glad to say that they accepted for me to continue education as a master's degree, public health and public policy, even though we advocate and fighting at the legislative level, but having greater policy development. And you have the understanding, but also continue getting a mentorship about and that issue, so we can fight violence against women. Because we always say, many women before me said, women's rights are human rights. And my fight, women's rights, will continue to the day I die. But not only that women issue, but also community issues, unfunded African American community issues. It's pandemic. They're talking about COVID-19 and many other things. We've been having COVID-19 for how long I can remember being in this country. This is nothing new for our community. Al Flower, myself, and many other activists have been meeting with the mayors of City of Minneapolis and St. Paul, meeting with the governor and the legislators, and meeting with our policymakers, asking them give fundings to these communities. And guess what? They listen to us, but guess what? The funding will be appropriated. Our ideas has always been used to identify what the needs are we fighting for and give it to white organizations, not to our or other organizations. So my fight will be helping me with seek more policy and more development leadership, and this opportunity going back to the University of Minnesota and educating myself. Just I'm already doing the work, to be honest with you. Just having that title, that's what the investment will be, and my fight will continue for that. So female genital mutilation, I did a lot of workshops from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. I'm going to continue doing those workshops, educating our health providers, community leaders. Enough is enough. Let's stop this ritual that is not about religion. That's my fight.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, our Wednesday edition. We're talking with two young elders, I call them young leaders in our community, Farhia Jordan, president of the St. Paul NAACP, and Brother Guy Bowling, an advocate for and creator of the Fathers Project, both continuing their education thanks to their being recently awarded Bush Fellowships. Bush Fellowships, a grant for about $100,000 that allows you to spend time on things that you couldn't afford to spend time on because you have to pay the rent and take care of the kids and the family and all the challenges. Al Flowers had called me just to alert me that you all had won. I kind of knew it already, but it reminded me this would be a great conversation. And Al, thank you for bringing this up to me. You know, and Al, I want you to take a minute to, as we talked on the phone yesterday, praise both Farhia and Guy. Number one, for who they are and what they do, but also give them and acknowledge, giving them credit for being persistent and seeking and getting the support that they have got through the Bush Foundation, because they, by attaining that, are saying to others, we should keep looking for and applying for and taking advantage of these opportunities in community. Al, what do you think?
Thanks, Al, and again, congratulations to Farhia and Guy. I thought this is very important. What happened? Bush giving them a fellowship. Farhia, let me do Farhia the person and her cause, and it's a cause that most people, you cringe about what happens to young girls in Africa, and then when it comes here in the U.S., it's even more devastating. And I give her credit for stepping out and taking that fight on when her community, nobody wanted her to do it. I watched her at the legislature. She made me sit there. She made me sit there with her, and she was doing it. And it was an experience I hadn't experienced, and I wouldn't want it to happen to any of our kids, African American descendants of the slave, because what we call it is a molestation. We call it a different thing, child abuse. We call it everything, and this is some ritual that they went through, and when I talked to her and know her history about what she went through as a kid, she was a young girl that wanted to get on the bike and ride the bike. She was just different. God had created her different, and people, you got to look at people like that's strong. But God put her on here for a mission to do this. Then I remember we went to New Salem Missionary Baptist Church. That was our first run with the NAACP organization, with which I was booted out for my volume of protests, things like that. And then she went in there amongst African American descendants of the slave and said she wanted to run. I thought she was crazy to say it, but she went in there, and I said, "Well, you got the right. You have the right to run." And she ran, and she was her first time. And once she spoke, African Americans do what they do. They supported her, and she became the assistant secretary of the Minneapolis NAACP. And I watched her as she moved on, as she was at the Capitol fighting day and night, staying there in the fight, which we should do from our community even harder. But you got to stay over there. You got to be persistent, and that's what she did. And then she created Voice of East African Women to take care of African sisters and not just African Americans, whoever could be a part of Voice of East African Women. And so she did that, and then she went on to run for the St. Paul NAACP president, and she won. And she won that with African American descendants of the slave vote. So she's been there. She's been an avid supporter of our community. She's not scared to say what you say all the time, Al, that the African American community gets the misery and the white community gets the money. She just said it today. So she's one of them kind of advocates, and she's strong. So I don't. What I say to her is to keep on pushing, and I'm glad she's on here today. She's always ready to talk, and she's one of our strong advocates and a supporter. I'm a supporter of hers. I could call that the drop of a dime, and she's gonna be there wherever we need her at to support our community. And so I have nothing to love for her. She knows that, and that's I just pray that what she's doing and the call people what they're doing, what she's doing, her calls, and that it get heard not around the world. When you're in the United States, it get heard around the world. So she knows I nothing but love for her, and she know I'll do anything for her and to make sure that she's successful. And that's what I would say to Farhia.
Thank you.
You know, so I praise you, and I'm thankful, and I know you're going to do great things and with this Bush fellowship. And I look forward to coming on, her coming back on here with Al many times to talk about as you're going through the process. And I know his communication is open for you, mine is open for you, and you're going to do great. That's what I would say to Farhia. And to my brother Guy, who boy, this Al, you got a story out of him. I've been playing ball with this guy at the YMCA. He'll play like I scratched him. He was the one scratching us up. But it's a story that I won't. I'm gonna let him go today, because to hear his story of what he just told to you is a story that while we was playing ball, I never would have knew. I never would have guessed that he was going through something like that. I'm a person that was raised by his mom, by my mom in the projects in Chicago, 4950 Robert Taylor projects. I was there, and my mom raised myself and my 5 sisters, and I had a brother that died. So I know when you're talking about Chicago, and when he said that statement about his mom didn't see no out for them as 2 young African American men, and she pulled them out. Well, that's why my mom left Chicago. She thought I would not survive in Chicago, and she did the same thing. She pulled us out when my dad died. I came up to Minneapolis a couple of times when I was 14, and I seen Minneapolis, and I stayed with my dad, me and my sister Lisa and Michelle. We stayed here with my dad, and then I went back to Chicago, continued to get in trouble. I was one of the worst kids in the world to my mom that I didn't know, and I did her bad, and so when Guy said that, it just did something to me. But when he told the story to you just now, that and he talked about the Fathers Project, what he's been doing since '98, it took all of what I wanted to talk about him, because I wanted to say me and him got a great relationship, but I never knew his story. And for you to say that, Guy, I'm an emotional person too. I might get emotional and be crazy, but to hear your story today, after knowing you over 20 some, 25, 30 years, we've been knowing each other that long, and you carried it like I would never knew your struggle and what you went through until today. And so that's why I say we learn something every day. And for this brother to tell that story, and I would like to hear it more, to tell our kids you still can survive when you and then to go through the trauma of being mad at your dad, and then by the time you weren't mad no more, he was gone. When I think about my dad, when my dad, I got up here, my dad died at 42 years old, and when he died, I came up here in March or something, and my dad died in May, and it happened so quick that you always wondered, oh man, I wish I would have got here earlier. I didn't know he was going to do that. But to say how your story is such a tremendous story, I already praise you for the work you do with the Fathers Project, but I couldn't say more than what you said today on this show, to tell all of us, to tell our community, hey, I survived it. I survived it, and that's what you did. I'm extremely proud of you for getting it, and whatever I could do to support you as you going on this next endeavor to expand what you're talking about. And we as a community should support the Fathers Project like we never had before. We should support it like we never had before. And your story, I'm just shocked, Al, that I never knew this story until today, because this brother carried himself like you would have never knew. He always had a smile on his face, even when I booked him in basketball.
Let me tell you this: people are going to say they've never heard Al Flowers talk like you talking right now. So let me compliment you at the passion and the clarity and the love that you're showing. It's a wonderful thing. And what it means is that we simply have to talk to each other more. We got to spend more time talking to each other, right? And our stories are the pathway to redemption. Absolutely. We have to value what we know, what we feel, what we've learned, and what we can learn. And we have to be courageous enough to tell the truth as it appears to us. We can change. We could be wrong, and it's okay to be wrong, but we have to be willing to trust that I'm bringing you the best of me whenever I see you, and I'm looking for the best in you whenever you see me. I say sometimes, sisters and brothers, that we have to establish a protocol that when we greet each other, we are actually speaking to the presence and the power of God in you. And I call forth that when I look at you and I extend my hand or my voice or my eyes to you, I am looking into the source of creation in you. That I call the presence of the Creator. And I'm hoping that what you see in me is the presence of the Creator as well. And that if we can begin to communicate on that level all the time, we'll bring mastermind ideas forward, and the ability to cooperate and to demonstrate the power of creation in everything we do and everything we say. We will become our true selves. That's what I believe. So let me bring this to this moment. The world is focused on the tragedy, the death, the murder of Brother George Floyd. We've all talked about trauma this morning, right? And the world is talking about trauma right now. Minneapolis, St. Paul, ground zero for a global discussion on trauma. And while we're looking at this period of 8 minutes and 46 seconds, where we witnessed the, not the epitome, but a demonstration of the end game and the object of white supremacy, of white supremacist thought, of structural racism. You could call it imperialism. You can call it colonialism. You can call it racism. You can call it by all of its names. All of it has to do with the denial of our humanity and the erroneous elevation of a corrupt idea and a corrupt identity that not only destroys us and other people of color around the world, but ultimately destroys the host. The people that are perpetrators of this inhumanity equally are being destroyed. Right now, we're at a point of having a conversation that's different. And I think that this conversation, talking about our parents, our fathers, about each other, about our passion to resolve problems, ties directly to what we saw in the heinous crime and the murder of George Floyd. And that in itself, if you pull back the lens a little bit, gives you a chance to look at the horror of the impact of COVID-19. And if you pull the lens back a little bigger and get a wider point of view, you look at the process, you called it, Farhia, of historic trauma and racial oppression and suppression, white supremacist thought. And if you pull that back further, you see something about how human beings can be destructive of other human beings if they have the wrong approach, if they feel like their gain depends on somebody else's loss. I think that we're talking about a solution that calls for justice in the case of George Floyd, but that justice itself will mean justice in dealing with COVID-19. It'll mean justice in dealing with the broad set of health disparities that and economic disparities and education disparities. It'll mean justice in dealing with the vestiges of colonialism, imperialism, and white supremacy. What do you think? Guy, you jump in first, then Farhia, then Al.
Wow, what a conversation, Brother Al. Both Al's. For me, I think about the power and conversion as a testimony, right? And what we've been sharing today about our backgrounds and inspiration and motivation that got us to be who we are, and the resiliency we develop as a result of it, in addition to the protective factors that were around us that helped us stay this course, right? And then begin to identify what your purpose is. I think that's critical. What your gifts and talents are, I believe that's critical, because those were given to you by the Creator, in addition to inheriting it from your parents, to develop them and deliver them to the world, right? So this is a timely conversation that we're having. So Sister Farhia shared her background story, Brother Al shared his, I shared mine. So part of what my hope is to continue to have these platforms that allow us to be able to share this information, because a lot of us is no different than other people and somebody needs to hear our story, no doubt about it. And so hopefully these platforms can share that. And I think about, Brother George Floyd, and I think we've gotten emotional on this conversation, but it's okay, because we're socialized to think that we can't be emotional, and then we get older, we be crying at commercials, right? So it comes out eventually, because when you only have a hammer in the toolbox, right, amongst your many tools, everything in life could look like a nail until you begin to add to that toolbox. We do that as we grow older and get inspired to fulfill a purpose once we identify what that is. So when I think about Brother George Floyd, I think about when I witnessed that videotape, and I took a minute to not watch it because I knew I didn't want to be more, I didn't want to experience outrage fatigue any more than I had already been experiencing for the last 5 years, which actually put me in position to begin to talk with the police department about how we need to, and we have to humanize one another first. We have to do that, right? And so when I heard Brother George Floyd, with his mother who had passed away, he screamed out to his mother, right? He screamed out to his mother. So what that told me is the relationship that he had with his mother was critical and it was solid, where he found himself in a position where he was about to lose his life. He called on somebody who was influential and important to him. And imagine when you have your father and your mother that close to you, you're going to call out to both of them. And the influence that we have on our kids, we're the first teacher, goes a long way for both our sons and our daughters. So when they're unable to have us, they could lead a life of decision making that could put them in position to suffer consequences and repercussions and store pain in the way that we've already shared. And so for me, I look at, we have to tackle this. We have to stabilize our families, stabilize our men, stabilize our communities, take back our communities. And I think most importantly, making sure that in the way that Brother Al described it, and I know you, Al McFarlane, we got to be there for our families because we're the ones that protect them and we influence them and we set them up and give them the value so they repeat what we did for them. And so I know my son has that as a result of what I went through, and he's doing that for his kids because they follow suit when you're there and you're able to be there and you provide for them in a way that those values are instilled in them. And then they know once they become that, they have to do the same thing because the vision was laid.
Farhia, go ahead and jump in here.
And I agree. First of all, thank you so much, Al, for all those kind words coming out of you. It means a lot. And I am grateful because of you. I'm involved because you give me the fire always when I watch your videos on Facebook. And I just want to say thank you for doing what you do. I agree. It's a long way to go. This and Al McFarlane, you say just right. You talked about, and we're not going to stop here. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep fighting. And May 24th, I was included presidential commission recommendation that I was asked to be included, and I accepted. This is the second time in this country it's been held such a thing, what they call a presidential commission. First time and last time they did was 1965 under President Lyndon Johnson. So right now, the new president, Donald Trump, also is considering about that. And what I talked about was where you guys need to stop talking, stop telling us how to live our own community. It's time for you to come to the community and listen to the community. We do a lot of community gathering. I would like to see the law enforcement take the time, listen what the community needs and put the recommendation forward. Work with the community instead of funding all the time, hundreds of $millions in the Department of all this great law enforcement, which I support and I believe. I think the community also has to be funded to do the work we do every day. And this funding doesn't only go to us just to do what we do, but this goes to helping the many communities who's disproportionately been left out. This pandemic that we're looking at it right now, it's been around for years, over 400 years in this country. It's nothing new. The COVID-19 has been happening in our community for many years. So my hope is when I talked this morning, I had a meeting with the governor and lieutenant governor about talking about our recommendations and what we would like to see. Hopefully this bonding bill, but maybe thereafter. So our ask is basically to see that they put resolution out there saying that racism is public health crisis, the state of Minnesota. And I'm middle of working right now, recommendation letter to our Mayor Melvin Carter in the city of St. Paul and asking him to do a resolution and work with the city council. And I'm hoping that it can happen in the city of Minneapolis. And Al Flower and his team and underground strategy group can work on it. And we need to say racism is a public health crisis. And also the other question that I told the governor this morning was, can he ban police chokehold and kneeling and all of these forces that they're doing? So both of them, now that they said this is something that is on the table that they're looking at it. They also looking at it, but racism is a public health crisis in the state of Minnesota. And also the other thing that we saw that we are happy to see that George Floyd's death is a wake-up call today. But we've been saying this for many, many, many years. Mm-hmm. The revolution started where? In Minneapolis, where the whole world is standing up and say, no more, enough is enough. Racism is real. We hope that our white communities understand it's time for you to listen. Let us tell you what the community needs are. When you are releasing 1.5 billion or 2.5 billion next few days, are we included? This language is there that says that some of this funding shall be directly appropriated to African American communities. Because each one of us are fighting the different organizations and they see the divideness between of us. But I say, and I will always say, we must, and I pray and I advocate, we, the African American in the state of Minnesota, like Al McFarlane and Afro was always saying, we must unite. We must unite. We must unite. We must come together. I don't care if you don't like me. And it don't matter if I don't like you. But let's come in together for the community issue.
Mm-hmm.
And then how can we stop this is when we are one. I don't care who's all of these tough guys on the streets and doing what they're doing. They see that, and that. And guess what the white people who's making the laws behind us, they're going to do? They're going to call Farhio and they're going to ask her to do that. They're going to call Al. They're going to ask her to do that. They're going to call such and such and such and such. We need to stop that. And my hope is to do better. We got to do better within ourselves to unite it first. And I'm sorry. I mean, yeah.
No, that's perfect. That's wonderful. Al, go ahead and take it from there. We got about 5 more minutes here. This is a great conversation. And to our listeners, this is what we do. We're doing this every day. And we want you to like it and to share it, subscribe on YouTube, but be a part of this conversation. Okay, go ahead, Al.
Al, first, yeah, this has been a lively. You could have did one of them a whole hour. Just from what they are saying. But I want to shout out to our leadership through this crisis of George Floyd death. That on the first day, our leadership went down and met with the chief and got all 4 of the officers terminated. I can't say all their names right now because we're running out of time. But our leadership, whether it was our pastor, the McAfee, the Tyrone Terrell, the Steve Belknap, the Urban League, the Spike Mosses, all these people, Pastor Heron, all these Lisa and them with a mother's love, all of them stepped up. But I want to say where we at right now as an African-American community, we can't let nobody steal the narrative from African-American, the descendant of the slave. We got to stand up. We got to step up. I watch as Al, you did a story about my mom and my sister and my niece and my about a family thing. But we got that from my family, our family. I think the Flowers family, the Smith family. I got a cousin down in St. Louis fighting about this issue. I'm watching her on social media, Tish Flowers, which I want to bring her to Minnesota to talk about what they're doing. But we could do a live show with her, Al. That's a relationship we done built. I would like to bring them to talk about their plight there. And so her name is Tish. And she and so I want to shout out because I seen her on your that she was viewing. She joined this viewing. So Tish, I know you down there fighting. I want to say that to my cousin, my double cousin. I know she down there fighting, but we're fighting the same battle, and we got to make sure all over the country that this time, Al, what you said about we get the misery, they get the funding. No, we can't afford that on this time. I'll say this, anybody listening, this time, this is the right time. This is our stand-up time. I don't care what they doing in the street. I don't care what their philosophy is. But this time, to the governor, the city council, the council, this is our time to really begin on business development, housing, making our streets safe, doing all those things. And we got to do it now. And so that's what I say to these guys again. I'm so proud to just be sitting here listening. I've never heard God a conversation like that. We always jive, but I never heard the story. And I've never heard him talk like I have today. And I'm proud to be a part of this broadcast. And I could have listened to you the whole time. And I thank y'all again and thank Al for continuing to push our message out through conversations with Al McFarlane. So that's my piece. This time, it's our time.
That's right.
I agree.
Great. Listen, I want to thank everybody. Guy, One of my daughters called me and told me that you were getting your award. So she's happy for you. So I'm saying that to say we almost family. Look like,
Right.
you know, so
Absolutely.
that's a good thing, you know. We're connected. We're connected, and we need to be connected, and we need to know each other and be for each other in as many ways as we can. I want to thank all of you. Again, I want to congratulate you, Guy Bowling. I want to congratulate you for Hill Jordan. I want to thank you, Al Flowers, and thank everybody that's listening, watching on Facebook Live or on YouTube. And I want to say, let's keep this conversation going. Let's be earnest, intentional, and let's be committed to what brought us here and committed to where we gotta go. I believe that victory is inevitable and victory is at hand. We simply have to stand and be and speak our truth and recognize who we are and be ourselves. With that, I'm going to say thanks to everybody listening, everybody watching. And again, thanks to my guest. Congratulations, Guy. Congratulations, Farheel.
Thank you.
Join me again this time tomorrow, 1 o'clock. We'll have another great conversation. We'll see you.
And
Take
congratulations, Guy. If I did not say that.
Congrats, Farheel. I was about to say the same thing. Congrats, Farheel.